Good afternoon, gentle listeners. It's Erin, your librarian storyteller for the day. Welcome to Legend and Lore, where every week I'll be telling you a handful of myths, folktales, and fairy tales that come from different cultures from all around the world, from Japan to South Africa, from Greece to Polynesia. This week I'll be regaling you with some Egyptian legend and lore, which is very notable as being one of the oldest document sources of mythology in the civilized world. Before we get started, make sure you stick around to the very end because at some point I will be giving out a keyword that you can use for your summer reading account. If you enter this keyword into your account, you might just earn enough points so that you just may win yourself a fabulous prize. With that PSA out of the way, let me give you a little bit of background. Egyptian mythology contains many variations as the culture has multiple gods that play multiple roles, oftentimes with very similar names or faces to one another. Repeatable themes that you will often find in these legends are stories of divine kingship, the duality of roles, brotherhood, and the separation of people and ideals. Now, normally with these videos, I begin with a story about the beginning, but we're going to kind of come off the beaten path just a little bit. I'm not going to be telling you how the world was created according to Egyptian mythology. In fact, I'm going to be telling you how it almost got destroyed at the very beginning. You see, like a lot of mythologies, the general concept of how the world was created was that there was nothing but chaos in the beginning. Endless, beautiful, maddening chaos. And from the ether emerged one god that produced life and light into the world, creating the sky, the earth, the sea, which in turn gave birth to other gods and goddesses that we may be a little more familiar with, such as Isis or Anubis and such like that. But what we don't, and while this god, the story I'm about to tell you, the god, the focus of it, is often sometimes credited with being the creator of the world, more commonly, he's known as the world's first ruler, the sun god, Ra. Now, Ra was a great and powerful leader in his time. He practiced the arts of law and order, justice and balance, humility and prosperity in the world, and worked very hard to make sure that there was peace. However, in this culture, and in many cultures, gods are not impervious to aging and death, and as the years went on, Ra became older. He became weaker. He became more and more decrepit. And as he did so, humans began to wonder if he was still fit for the job, and so they began to plot against him. When Ra learned of this, he was filled with fury and wanted to bring vengeance down upon humanity by destroying it. But Ra himself was not actually a very violent god. He had someone else to do that for him. Depicted in his imagery, Ra typically has a disc above his head, often seen as an eye. This is called the Eye of Ra, and it often is representative of a female goddess that Ra will send down to do his bidding. Many goddesses have taken on this form, but in this particular story, it was the goddess Hathor, who is known as Ra's feminine mirror, that he sent down to do his bidding and to destroy humanity. Hathor in iconography is depicted as a woman with cow-like features. Not exactly what you'd consider threatening, but cows are very much revered in Egyptian culture. And, well, she brought the pain, as it were. She brought destruction and death and horror upon humanity. People were dying left and right. At the first taste of blood, she transformed into the lioness goddess Sekhmet and massacred all of the rebellious humans that she could get her hands on. However, after one day of her rampaging, Ra had regrets and decided that he did not want to wipe out mankind. They had been punished enough. There had been enough death. But at this point, Hathor turned Sekhmet had become bloodthirsty with the taste of humans on her lips and was unable to be stopped. In order to prevent her from wiping all humans out, he ordered that beer be dyed red and poured all over the land. The Eye of Ra, as she was, saw the beer and thought it to be blood, lapping it up as if it were the coolest of waters, becoming very, very drunk in the process, and in her inebriated state was able to let go of her anger and become the gentle and harmless Hathor once more. As a result, weakened by her losing a lot of her power, Ra sent another god to fetch her and brought back. As she was pacified, she returned to his side, and there was joy all throughout the land. Mostly. Because you see, not all humans had plotted against Ra. In fact, many didn't, and they were furious at the traitors who still remained. And so war continued down on Earth, which is how battle was really introduced to the Egyptians according to their stories. But Ra himself, at this point, was fairly tired of ruling and decided he would spend his happy retirement returning to his calling as a sun god, not a ruler, but a bringer of light, and would return to his space in the sky and return to his daily travel across the blue, bringing light down onto the people. A peaceful time, I would imagine, for a once strong ruler, and so the torch was passed. But who was it passed to, you may wonder? Well, that is our second story. This is the story of Osiris, Isis, and Set, or commonly known as the death of Osiris. Osiris today is known as a god of fertility, agriculture, the afterlife, the dead, resurrection, life, and vegetation. But before he became the god of death, and so on and so which, he was a mighty pharaoh, ruling over the lands with his beautiful sister wife Isis, bringing joy, prosperity, and greatness to the land. Under Osiris's rule, all was well. All were happy. No one could complain whatsoever. Except one. While Osiris, being the firstborn of the union of Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky, assumed the rule of Lord of the earth, and Iris, his sister, as his queen and consort, the other children of Geb and Nut had less prestigious jobs. However, the only one who had a problem with this was Set. Set was jealous of Osiris deeply. There are multiple reasons for why what I will tell you comes to pass. Some say he did what he did because Osiris gave him a really terrible kick one day. Others say he was jealous simply of Osiris's popularity and power. Some say he coveted Isis. Some say he was absolutely furious at Osiris for sleeping with his wife, Nephesis. There are many reasons for what he did, but it all ends in death. But luckily, death is not always the end. In this case, it's a beginning. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Filled with jealousy and rage and wanting to take power, Set plotted in order to kill his brother. Finally, he decided on a way to do it. Set had a beautiful coffin created, made to Osiris's exact height and width, and then threw an enormous banquet to which he invited absolutely everyone that he cared about, and that Osiris cared about, the gods, the people, and so what, as well as his fellow conspirators. During the great banquet, when all were full and drunk and merry, and inhibitions were lowered, Set presented the coffin and called out to the crowd, "Whoever fits this box may claim ownership of it." Now I know what you're thinking. Who would want a coffin? Keep in mind, this thing was beautiful, golden and inlaid with jewels. It was absolutely magnificent. It was a kingly gift, and all wanted to be able to claim it. One by one, they all tried to fit in the coffin, but absolutely nobody fit. Finally, Set called out, "Brother Osiris, please, won't you give it a try?" Osiris, thinking nothing of it, thinking that his brother was only trying to have some fun, laughed and lay down in it, quite happily, seeing that it fit him perfectly. He looked up at his brother and said, "Why, Set, if I didn't know better, I would say this coffin is meant precisely for me." Set looked down at his brother and smiled a cruel smile. "That's because it is," he said, and he closed the lid and locked his brother in. Set's conspirators sprang from the shadows and blocked off anyone's attempt to approach the coffin and free Osiris. While they kept the people back, Set took the fastened coffin and tossed it into the Nile, where it was carried away down the river. Osiris's body traveled and traveled. He spent so long in that box that he lingered between a space between life and death. And eventually his coffin became lodged in a great tamarisk tree growing near Byblos and Ponica. The tree quickly grew around the coffin until it completely contained it within. The king, Malcander, the king of Byblos, walked the shore with his wife and saw the tree at a distance, its sweet scent filling the air and its beautiful branches twining around, and decided that he truly wished to take it home and make an ornamental pillar for his court out of it. So he did, never knowing that Osiris within his coffin lay between the branches, trapped, until finally the last lingering breath that Osiris had gave out, and he was gone. While this was going on, as Set was lording over his victory and ruling Egypt, Isis, his queen, his sister, his wife, his greatest love, was determined to find Osiris. Taking the form of a kite, a bird, she flew over the Nile seeking anything that might resemble her beloved husband. She took on many forms, not just that of a bird. She disguised herself as animals. She disguised herself as an old woman. And it was at this point, while she was disguised as an old woman, sitting along the shore of the Nile and weeping for her missing husband, that she was stumbled upon by royal handmaidens of the court of Byblos and invited into the court. While there, she ingratiated herself to the king and queen and was asked to nursemaid for their young sons. During this time, one of the children was stung by a scorpion and came close to death. Isis was able to save the child's life, and in the process revealed herself as a goddess to the court and to the king and queen. Grateful for their child's life, they said, "Any reward, anything that you wish, we will be happy to give." This is when Isis took note of the pillar within the court and recognized her husband and instinctively knew that Osiris lay inside, and she pointed to it and said, "All I want is that pillar." They gave it gladly, and taking it away and tearing it open, revealed the coffin, and opening it, she found her husband. But it was too late. Osiris was gone. Or was he? For you see, as Isis took Osiris from the tree and carried his body back to Egypt, where she lay him in the swampy region of the Nile Delta, she held him, she sang to him, she performed magic over him. And just for an instant, her love and her power was able to bring Osiris back to life. Just long enough for her to lay with him and conceive a child. Hoping that she would be able to bring her husband back to full life, she left his body in the caretaking of her sister Nephthys, also Set's wife, in order to guarding it so Set would not find it. Sadly, however, Set did find them and was able to talk his way past Nephthys to get to Osiris. Seeing his brother now clinging to life, he approached him and hacked him up into pieces, scattering Osiris's body all across the land and into the Nile. When Isis returned and saw what had happened, she was horrified. But taking a breath, she began her search all over again, working and finding the pieces of her murdered husband, one by one with her sister's help. And finally, all the pieces were found and put back together, except for one. Isis was unable to find Osiris's penis, which apparently had been thrown into the Nile and eaten by an oxyrhynchus fish, which is now considered in Egypt to be a forbidden food for many reasons. Regardless, Isis was able to restore Osiris's body, but she could not restore his life. He was incomplete, whether from his loss of his penis, or the loss of his soul. He could not return to the land of the living. Instead, he withdrew to the afterlife, where he became lord and judge of the dead. Isis, fearing what Set might do to her unborn son, hid until she was ready to give birth to little Horus, and stowed him away among the swamps of Egypt until he was grown. And when he grew up, Horus would then go forward to be able to challenge Set and battle him for control of the world. How that story plays out is a tale for another time. Okay, we are now at the halfway point, and as promised, I have a keyword to give out for you. The keyword of the day is, all capitals, tamarisk. Tamarisk. Tamarisk, for the tree in which Osiris's body was kept. The last story is not so much a myth, but more of a legend, a story, known as the Tale of Two Brothers, dating back to the reign of the fifth pharaoh of the dynasty of Egypt. The story, as I said, it is the tale of two brothers. The older brother, Ampu, and the younger brother, Bata. The two lived together. Anpu had a wife, and Bata did not. However, Bata was happy to live in the house of his brother. They worked well together, and Bata in fact saw Anpu as a sort of father figure in fact, and did all that he could to make his life easier, and Anpu did the same. They worked together, farming the land and raising cattle. One day, however, Anpu's wife, filled with lust, attempted to seduce Bata. But when Bata refused her advances, claiming that he would not so injure his brother/father in such a way, the wife faked a seduction and a beating, and went to Anpu and told him that Bata had forced himself upon her and beat her when she did not comply. As a result, Anpu attempted to kill Bata, but Bata ran as fast as he could and prayed to Ra to save him. The god, looking down, created a crocodile-infested lake between the two brothers, finally giving Bata enough time and enough space to explain what happened to his brother. At first, Anpu did not believe him, but in order to prove his sincerity, Bata took a dagger and severed his genitals, all of them, throwing them into the water for a catfish to eat, to prove his sincerity. At this point, Anpu pretty much believed him, and there was peace between the two. Bata, not wanting to cause any more trouble, stated that he would go to the Valley of Cedars, where he would place his heart on the top of a blossom of a cedar tree, so that if it was cut down, Anpu would be able to find it and allow Bata to become alive again should the worst ever happen to him. Bata also said that in this case, the only way that Anpu would know that his brother was in trouble and that he needed his help was if Anpu was ever given a mug of beer that would froth and foam. When he was given this, he would know that his brother desperately needed his help. Listening to his brother, Anpu nodded and returned home, and promptly killed his wife and threw her carcass to the dogs. Meanwhile, Bata went on his merry way to find a new home in the Valley of Cedar, building a happy life for himself. Because of his kind and patient and noble nature, the gods took a great favor on him, and Khnum, one of the ancient gods considered the source of the Nile and also the creator of mankind, decided he would make a wife for Bata. So beautiful was she that it ended up ending in tragedy, sadly. Because of her beauty, the pharaoh himself coveted Bata's wife. And though she refused him many times, eventually she fell victim to his charms and decided to run away from Bata with him. But fearing retribution from her husband for their actions, she begged the pharaoh, telling him, "You must cut down the tree in which Bata has put his heart. If you do so, Bata will die, and we will be free of him forever." The pharaoh ordered it so, and Bata breathed his last breath. Miles and miles away, Anpu received his mug of frothy beer and knew that his brother desperately needed him. Traveling to the Valley of the Cedar, he looked for the cut-down tree and found it after 3 years of searching. Taking the heart, he put it into a bowl of cold water, and as a result, Bata came back to life. With the gods' blessing and their powers blessed upon him, Bata took the form of a bull in order to gain himself an audience with the pharaoh and his former wife. But his wife was clever and knew right away that the bull was her old husband in animal form. Turning to the pharaoh, she begged him that she may eat the bull's liver. The bull was sacrificed, and as Ptah's blood began to fall, 2 persea trees grew. Ptah now lived in the form of a tree. However, Ptah's former wife still saw through it, still saw that Ptah lived inside, and again appealed to the pharaoh, cut down the trees, use them, and furnish your home. If you do so, we will be free of him forever. The pharaoh acquiesced to her wishes, but as they were cutting down the tree, a splinter flew from the tree as it fell, and entered into the mouth of his wife, of Ptah's former wife, impregnating her. From the fallen trees, nothing came, and for a long time, the pharaoh and Ptah's wife were certain that they had found peace, until she discovered the baby growing deep within. When the baby was born, the pharaoh, thinking it was his son, named it to be crown prince. And when the pharaoh died, the baby, growing to a boy to a man, reveals himself to be Ptah, resurrected once more. As thanks for his brother, for his loyalty, he names Anpu crown prince. And the brothers live happily ever after, at peace with one another, with their power, and with their country, happy to rule beside each other forever. And that is all I have for you today, gentle listeners. Quite a lot of stories to be told, and there's many more to come. Keep listening, keep researching. You might just find something you like. And tune in next time for the next installment into a brand new culture and a new set of legends. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Please be well, and I shall see you soon. Goodbye.